Years ago, in the heart of a forgotten war, a soldier carried a wounded girl out of the flames without ever asking her name. Now that girl sits on a throne beneath twin suns, and she whispers, "You once saved my life, now stay by my side." Can a single act of kindness reshape the balance of an entire galaxy? The shuttle descended through a veil of violet light, its hull whispering as it adjusted to the alien atmosphere. Captain Arman Vale stood alone in the narrow cabin, one hand resting on the cool metal wall as the planet of Elyndra unfolded beneath him. Twin suns hovered low in the sky, casting overlapping halos across the horizon. From above, the capital city looked less like architecture and more like a living organism. Curved structures grown rather than built, luminous threads of energy weaving between towers like veins, carrying light instead of blood. He checked the clasp of his formal uniform for the third time, medals aligned, collar straight, boots polished to a degree that would have impressed even his old drill sergeant, who believed dust was a moral failing. Arman exhaled slowly. He had faced artillery fire without blinking, yet diplomatic visits unsettled him in ways battle never had. In war, at least, the rules were clear. Survive, protect, move forward. In courts, the weapons were subtler and rarely announced themselves. The shuttle touched down with a gentle hum. The hatch unfolded outward in a smooth arc, revealing a reception platform of pale stone that seemed to emit its own quiet glow. A line of alien guards waited at attention. They were tall and poised, their armor shaped like flowing metal rather than rigid plating. Their faces were strikingly human, but the long, elegant ears that curved back from their temples marked them unmistakably as Elendran. Their eyes reflected the twin suns with a faint silver sheen. Arman stepped forward, boots echoing faintly. He resisted the urge to salute too sharply. He had been briefed. Elendrans preferred gestures that suggested equality rather than dominance. So he inclined his head instead, careful, respectful. A hovering orb drifted toward him, its surface shimmering with shifting glyphs. "Welcome, Captain Arman Vale of the Terran Defense Fleet," it chimed in a pleasantly neutral tone. "Please refrain from sudden movements, hostile thoughts, or interpretive dance." Arman blinked. "Interpretive dance. Previous visitor incident," the orb replied solemnly. He coughed to hide a laugh. "I'll do my best." The guards did not smile, but one of them tilted her head slightly, as though amused despite herself. The tension on the platform eased just enough to allow breathing. He was escorted through an arched gateway that seemed grown from living crystal and wood fused together. The corridor beyond adjusted subtly as they walked, widening to accommodate his stride. Light rippled across the walls in response to movement, as if the palace itself were observing him. He had read about Elendran bioarchitecture, about their integration of organic and engineered systems, but experiencing it firsthand unsettled him in a quiet, persistent way. The building felt aware. "Is it judging me?" he muttered under his breath. "The palace does not judge," the hovering orb replied. "It merely records. That's worse." They entered the royal court. The chamber was vast but not oppressive. Instead of cold grandeur, it radiated calm. Trees grew along the perimeter, their branches arching overhead, leaves glowing faintly with bioluminescent patterns. Between them, transparent panels displayed shifting star maps, constellations expanding and contracting in real time as trade routes and defense grids updated across the galaxy. At the far end of the chamber rose the throne, not elevated by an absurd staircase or draped in banners, but integrated seamlessly into the living structure behind it. And seated upon it was the queen. Arman's breath stalled for half a second. She looked human. That was his first, disorienting thought. A woman poised and still, dark hair cascading over her shoulders, posture straight without appearing rigid. Her skin caught the light of the twin suns filtering through the chamber ceiling, giving her an almost luminous quality. And then there were her ears, long, elegant, tapering gently behind her hair. Not grotesque, not exaggerated, simply different in a way that made her seem both familiar and impossibly distant. Her eyes found his immediately. There was recognition there. He felt it like a shift in gravity. "Captain Vale," she said, her voice steady and clear. The translation systems softened the alien cadences but did not erase them. "Elyndra welcomes you." He bowed again, more deeply this time. "Your Majesty, it's an honor." "Is it?" she asked lightly. He hesitated. "I was advised that it was." A faint curve touched her lips. Around them, advisors stood in semicircles, men and women of her species, all bearing the same long ears, their expressions composed. Yet several pairs of silver-sheened eyes flicked between the queen and the human soldier with unmistakable curiosity. "We are grateful for your service during the border conflicts," the queen continued. "Your record indicates exemplary conduct." "Mostly luck," Arman replied before he could stop himself, "and very patient medics." A murmur moved through the court. The hovering orb near his shoulder emitted a soft chime, perhaps warning him that humility might translate poorly. But the queen's expression warmed rather than cooled. "Luck," she repeated thoughtfully. "An interesting strategy." "I recommend it highly," he said. "Works at least 30% of the time." A few advisors exchanged glances that bordered on scandalized. One elderly counselor leaned toward another and whispered something that caused both of them to study Arman as if he were a mildly unpredictable weather pattern. The queen rose from her throne. The movement was fluid, unhurried. The chamber seemed to respond, light shifting subtly as she stepped forward. She descended the shallow curve that separated throne from court floor, closing the distance between them. Up close he could see the faint scar at her temple, nearly hidden by her hair. A thin line, pale against her skin, something tugged at his memory. Her gaze did not waver. "You have traveled far." "Yes, Majesty, and you have faced much." "I suppose we all have," he said. Her eyes flickered briefly, something unspoken passing through them. "Indeed." Silence settled, but it was not empty. It vibrated with implication. Arman felt as though he were standing at the edge of a memory he could not quite grasp. The queen turned slightly toward the court. "Captain Vale will remain as our honored guest for the duration of his visit. Ensure his comfort." An advisor stepped forward. "Majesty, security protocols are sufficient," she replied gently, though the tone carried unmistakable authority. The advisor inclined his head and withdrew. Arman suppressed a sigh of relief. He had no desire to be at the center of an interstellar security debate. He preferred arguments that involved fewer robes. As the formal proceedings continued, introductions, acknowledgments, discussions of trade corridors and joint research initiatives, Arman's attention drifted back to the queen's face. Each time their eyes met, there was that same undercurrent, like a current beneath still water. He searched his memory. Smoke, heat, a battlefield lit by erratic plasma fire, a transport downed in the crossfire. He had run toward it because someone had to. Inside, among twisted metal and flickering sparks, he had found a girl. Long ears matted with blood, silver eyes wide with pain and disbelief. She had tried to speak, insisting she was important. He had told her everyone said that when they were bleeding. He had patched her wound with shaking hands while cracking terrible jokes about charging rescue fees. He had left before reinforcements arrived. He had never learned her name. The memory struck him fully now, like a delayed shockwave. His gaze snapped back to the queen, the scar, the eyes. The way she watched him not as a diplomat evaluating a soldier, but as someone measuring the distance between past and present. Impossible, he thought. And yet, the hovering orb drifted closer again. "Captain, your heart rate has increased by 12%. Palace air quality," he muttered. "Atmosphere composition is optimal. Then I must be allergic to royalty." The orb paused. Noted. Across the chamber, the queen's lips twitched, as though she had heard him despite the distance. When the session finally adjourned, the court dispersed in measured waves. Advisors retreated into archways, guards resumed silent patrols. The queen remained standing where she was. "Captain Vale," she said softly, "walk with me." It was not a command shouted across the hall. It was an invitation spoken directly to him. He approached, every step echoing louder in his own ears than in the chamber. As they moved toward a side corridor lined with softly glowing leaves, he became acutely aware of the absence of witnesses. The palace lights dimmed slightly, adjusting to a more intimate setting. "You do not remember," she said quietly once they were beyond the main hall. It was not accusation. It was observation. Arman swallowed. I remember a battlefield. A transport, a girl who insisted she was important. She turned to face him fully. I was, she said, a pause, though not in the way I believed at the time. The corridor seemed to narrow, or perhaps his world had. You saved my life, Captain, she continued. Years ago, you carried me from fire and ruin without asking my name, without knowing my rank, without caring. His throat felt dry. You were just someone who needed help. A softness entered her expression, relief, perhaps, or gratitude that had waited too long. To you, she said, I was only someone. The weight of it settled between them, heavier than metals, heavier than diplomacy. He let out a slow breath. Well, he said carefully, if I'd known you were going to become queen, I might have charged that rescue fee after all. For a heartbeat, she stared at him. Then she laughed. It was not the restrained amusement of a ruler. It was bright and genuine, echoing softly down the living corridor. The tension that had coiled around them loosened just enough to allow air. I would have paid, she replied. Good, he said. I've always regretted my poor business sense. And for the first time since his shuttle pierced Elyndra's violet sky, Captain Arman Vale felt that perhaps this visit would not be defined by politics or protocol, but by the quiet, astonishing realization that the girl he once carried from a battlefield now stood before him as queen of a world. The doors to the inner council chamber sealed behind them with a soft harmonic tone, and the hum of the main court dissolved into a distant murmur. Arman stood still for a moment, aware that the air here felt different, quieter, heavier with intention. The walls shimmered faintly, threads of light moving beneath their surface like slow currents beneath ice. The queen did not immediately speak. She walked to the center of the circular chamber, where a suspended projection of the surrounding star systems rotated in slow, luminous silence. Her long ears caught the shifting glow as she tilted her head slightly, studying the map as though it were a living thing. You are uncomfortable, she said at last. I've been shot at in less intimidating rooms, Arman replied. She glanced at him. This room does not shoot. Yet, a faint smile touched her mouth. Your suspicion is admirable, slightly insulting, but admirable. He moved closer to the projection, watching as trade routes flickered in blue and disputed territories pulsed in amber. Several systems near the former border conflict zone glowed faintly red. I thought the war was over, he said quietly. It is, she answered. Officially, wars often end on paper long before they end in memory. He studied her profile. The scar at her temple seemed more visible in the shifting light. You've been watching those systems. I have, she said, and so have others. The projection shifted at her gesture. Data cascaded through the air, fleet movements, energy fluctuations, encrypted transmissions intercepted along outer corridors. Arman recognized the patterns immediately. Not open aggression, testing, probing. Someone's measuring your response time, he muttered. Yes, and they're doing it carefully enough that if you react too strongly, you look paranoid. Her silver eyes flicked toward him. You understand. I've seen it before, back home. He crossed his arms. It's the kind of thing that leads to very long meetings and very short tempers. Then you will feel at home here, she said dryly. He huffed a laugh. Comforting. She dismissed the projection with a subtle motion, and the stars dissolved into threads of light that retreated into the walls. Silence settled again. I did not bring you here only for nostalgia, she said. I assumed that, he replied. Though if you wanted to reminisce about my heroic hair during the war, I'd have understood. She looked at his closely cropped hair. It must have been very brief. Tragically, her expression softened, but her gaze remained steady. I need someone who will speak honestly to me. You have advisors. I have excellent advisors, she corrected. They are brilliant, loyal, cautious. A pause. They also see me as their queen before they see me as a person. And that's a problem. It can be. He studied her more carefully now. The composure was still there, the authority unmistakable. But beneath it was something else. Fatigue, perhaps, or isolation. You want someone who isn't afraid to disagree, he said. I want someone who once ignored my title and saved my life anyway. He shifted his weight. That was different. Was it? Yes, he said firmly. You were bleeding. I'm not qualified to handle royalty that isn't actively on fire. Her laughter returned, softer this time. Your qualifications are not as limited as you believe. A subtle chime sounded near the ceiling. The hovering orb from earlier drifted through a seam in the wall, rotating slightly as it approached. Majesty, it chimed. Counselor Thurin requests clarification regarding the humans' continued oxygen consumption. Arman blinked. That's rude. It is a resource allocation inquiry, the orb replied. Tell Counselor Thurin I breathe efficiently, Arman said. The queen folded her hands behind her back. Inform the counselor that the human's presence is by my direct command. The orb paused. Shall I include the phrase, try not to panic? She considered. No, that would cause panic. Understood. The orb drifted away. Arman rubbed the back of his neck. You're going to face resistance. I always do. Because of me. Because I choose, she corrected gently. Rulers who choose unsettle those who prefer predictability. He exhaled slowly. You're asking me to stay. Yes. In what capacity? She stepped closer, the distance between them narrowing until he could see the faint flecks of light within her irises. As my personal military advisor. And she hesitated only briefly, as my protector. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. You have an entire guard. I do. They look extremely capable. They are. And yet you want a human who trips over palace floors. You adapt quickly, she said, and you are not afraid of me. He snorted softly. That's debatable. Her long ears tilted slightly backward, a subtle movement he was beginning to recognize as curiosity. Are you afraid now? He considered the question honestly. No, he said at last. Concerned, maybe, overwhelmed. Slightly aware that my life just became much more complicated. That is a reasonable assessment. He walked past her, pacing slowly along the edge of the chamber. The walls responded faintly to his movement, threads of light pulsing in rhythm with his steps. If I stay, he said carefully, this stops being a diplomatic courtesy visit. It becomes a statement. Yes, your enemies will see it as an alliance with Earth. Yes, Earth will see it as me going rogue. Her expression shifted, not alarmed but attentive. Would they? I didn't exactly request permission to become anyone's royal shadow. She tilted her head. You would not be a shadow. No, you would stand beside me. The simplicity of it unsettled him more than any political implication. He stopped pacing. Why me? She did not answer immediately. Instead, she reached up and brushed her fingers lightly against the scar at her temple. Because when I was a frightened girl in a burning transport, she said quietly, you looked at me and saw only someone worth saving. The chamber seemed to hold its breath. You told me, she continued, a faint smile ghosting her lips, that if I survived, I owed you one terrible joke. He stared at her. I did not. You did. That sounds like something I'd say, he admitted. I have spent years considering how to repay that debt. You don't owe me anything, he said. Her gaze sharpened slightly. Do not diminish what you did. He held her eyes, then sighed. Fine, if you insist on dramatic interpretations. I do, she said lightly. He let out a slow breath. You realize if I accept, I'm going to ask uncomfortable questions. I expect you to. I'll disagree with you. I will disagree with you in return. I make poor ceremonial speeches. I will not ask you to make them. He hesitated. And if things escalate, if those red systems on your map decide to stop testing and start acting, then, she said calmly, we will face it. He studied her again, not the queen alone, but the woman who had once gripped his sleeve in a smoke-filled wreckage and refused to let go until she believed she would live. You're certain about this, he said. Yes, and you trust me. I trusted you when you had no reason to protect me, she replied. Trusting you now is the simplest decision I will make this year. Silence stretched between them, but it was no longer tense. It felt like the pause before stepping across a threshold. Arman ran a hand through his hair. My commanding officer is going to have opinions. I am prepared to negotiate. With him, with anyone. He laughed softly. You really are different from that girl. Her eyes warmed. She is still here. He nodded once. Then I suppose I can't let her down. The chamber lights brightened subtly, as if responding to an unspoken shift. So, he said, straightening slightly, what does a royal protector actually do, besides breathe efficiently? She stepped back toward the center of the room, gesturing for the star map to return. It flared into existence around them, systems spinning slowly. You will help me see what others overlook, she said. You will stand with me during council deliberations, and when necessary, you will remind me that mercy is not weakness. He tilted his head, and if I think mercy is a bad idea, then you will say so. He considered that, then nodded slowly. All right, she echoed. All right, he repeated. I'll stay. For a fraction of a second, something unguarded crossed her face, relief so profound it bordered on vulnerability. Then the queen returned, composed and luminous. Welcome to Elyndra, Captain Vale, she said softly. He glanced up at the rotating stars around them. You realize, he added, if this goes badly, I'm blaming you. That is acceptable. And if it goes well. She met his gaze steadily. Then we will both be very busy. He smiled faintly. I've handled worse assignments. Outside the chamber, beyond the living walls and glowing corridors, the red systems on the star map continued to pulse, slow, patient, watchful. But inside the council chamber, beneath the quiet hum of alien technology and unspoken history, a different kind of alliance had just been forged, not with fleets or treaties, but with memory, trust, and the dangerous possibility that one act of kindness years ago might yet alter the fate of entire worlds. The first sign that something had shifted came not from the red systems on the star map, but from the council chamber itself. Arman noticed it before anyone else. The projection above the circular floor flickered, not an error, not a malfunction, but a pattern. A deliberate pulse woven through trade signals and civilian traffic. Subtle, almost polite. They're no longer measuring response time, he said quietly. The queen stood beside him, hands clasped behind her back, silver eyes reflecting the rotating constellations. No, they're sending a message. Around them, advisors murmured as streams of data unfolded in midair. Energy signatures flared briefly along the outer corridor, small, controlled disruptions in navigation beacons. Not enough to cause casualties, enough to demonstrate reach. Counselor Thurin's long ears angled sharply backward. A provocation, he said. We must deploy a defensive fleet immediately. And confirm their narrative. Arman replied before he could stop himself. The chamber went still. Thurin's gaze shifted to him. You presume to understand our narrative. I understand escalation, Arman said evenly. They're trying to make you look unstable. If you mobilize now, you validate their claim that Elyndra intends expansion. A faint ripple moved through the advisors. The queen did not look at him, but he felt her attention sharpen. What would you suggest? Invite them, he said. Silence, Thurin blinked slowly. Invite whom? The faction behind the disruptions. Offer open dialogue, publicly. Make it impossible for them to justify further interference without exposing themselves. A younger advisor scoffed. You assume they want diplomacy. No, Arman replied. I assume they want control of the narrative. Take that away. The queen stepped forward, her voice calm but carrying. Prepare a transmission. Broadcast across all contested systems. Elyndra invites formal discussion regarding corridor stability and shared security. Thurin hesitated. Majesty. Do it, she said. The council dispersed into motion, holographic consoles lighting up around the chamber. Arman exhaled slowly. That was bold, he murmured. She glanced at him. You advised it. I know. I just didn't expect you to take my advice in front of everyone. Her lips curved faintly. You requested uncomfortable honesty. He huffed a quiet laugh. Fair. The transmission was sent within the hour. Elendran diplomats appeared across secured channels, poised and composed. The invitation was framed not as accusation, but as opportunity. A shared forum. Transparent discourse. Mutual accountability. For 2 days, nothing happened. The red systems continued to pulse, but no further disruptions occurred. Elyndra held steady, no fleet mobilization, no aggressive maneuvers. On the 3rd day, a reply arrived. A fleet did not emerge from hyperspace. Instead, a single envoy vessel requested docking clearance. Its transponder codes matched one of the rival outer factions that had long resented Elyndran influence. The council chamber filled again. "They come with minimal escort," Thurin reported, disbelief threading his voice. Arman crossed his arms. "They don't want to look like the aggressors." The queen inclined her head. "Prepare the reception." He glanced at her. "You're going to meet them personally." "Yes. Of course you are." She tilted her head slightly. "You disapprove." "I'm calculating the odds of someone trying something dramatic." Her eyes glinted. "You will be there." "That's what worries me." Her laughter was brief, but genuine. The envoy arrived under full public broadcast. Elyndran citizens watched from across the planet as the rival delegation entered the Grand Court. No hidden negotiations. No shadow deals. Their leader was tall, sharp-eyed, his expression carefully neutral. His species bore similarities to both humans and Elyndrans, though his ears were shorter, less pronounced. He bowed stiffly. "Your Majesty," he began, "we appreciate your invitation." "Transparency benefits us all," she replied evenly. Arman stood at her right, not behind her, beside her. He felt the weight of countless eyes, court members, citizens, foreign observers, watching for the smallest misstep. The envoy spoke of corridor instability, of trade inequities, of perceived Elyndran dominance. His tone was controlled, his grievances measured. Arman listened carefully. When the envoy paused, the queen responded not with defense, but with acknowledgement. She offered shared oversight of contested corridors, joint patrols rather than unilateral ones, open data access. Murmurs rippled through both delegations. "You would relinquish sole authority?" the envoy asked, unable to fully conceal his surprise. "I would share responsibility," she corrected. Arman saw it then, the moment the narrative shifted. The rival leader had expected resistance, expected pride. Instead, he was confronted with cooperation. "And if we decline?" The envoy pressed. "Then the offer remains open," she said calmly. "Elyndra will not escalate." The envoy studied her for a long moment. His gaze flicked briefly toward Arman. "You trust a human to stand beside you," he observed. "I trust those who have proven worthy," she replied. Arman resisted the urge to shift uncomfortably. The envoy's expression softened just slightly. "Very well," he said at last. "We will enter joint oversight discussions." The chamber exhaled as one. The red systems on the star map dimmed gradually over the following days. Not extinguished entirely, but steady now. Balanced. Crisis had been averted not through force, but through refusal to perform the expected script. Later, in the quiet of the inner corridor, Arman leaned against the living wall and let out a slow breath. "You did it," he said. "We did," she corrected. "You took a risk." "So did you," she replied. He studied her, noticing how different she seemed now, not because she had changed, but because he understood her more fully. The frightened girl in the wreckage, the queen on the throne, they were not separate people. They were layers of the same strength. "You could have crushed them politically," he said. "Yes, but you didn't." "No." He smiled faintly. "That's growth." Her long ears angled slightly. "Yours as well." "Mine. You once solved problems with decisive force." "I still do." "But you now pause," she said gently. "You consider consequence beyond victory." He thought about that. On the battlefield years ago, he had acted instinctively, save the injured, survive the firefight, move on. Now he had advised patience. Strategy, narrative control. "I guess I've learned a few things," he admitted. "You have," she said. "So have I." They walked slowly through the glowing corridor. The palace lights responded softly to their movement. "Do you regret staying?" she asked. He shook his head. "No," even with Counselor Thurin's oxygen concerns. "Especially because of them." She laughed quietly. He stopped walking, turning to face her fully. "When I pulled you from that transport," he said, "I never imagined this." "Nor did I," she replied. "You were terrified." "I was. And now?" She met his gaze without hesitation. "Now I am responsible." He nodded. "You carry it well." "Because I do not carry it alone." The weight of that settled between them, not heavy, but grounding. In the weeks that followed, joint patrols stabilized the contested systems. Trade disputes eased under shared oversight. Elyndra's willingness to collaborate reshaped its reputation from dominant power to balanced leader. Earth, after initial alarm, formalized Arman's role as liaison rather than rogue agent. His commanding officer sent a message that contained both a reprimand and a reluctant note of pride. "Try not to start any interstellar incidents," the message concluded. "No promises," Arman muttered. The hovering orb drifted beside him. "Statistical likelihood of incident initiation has decreased by 22%. "I'm improving," he said. "Yes," the orb agreed solemnly. "Marginally." One evening, beneath the twin suns as they dipped low over Elyndra's horizon, Arman stood beside the queen on a balcony overlooking the city. Citizens moved below, unaware of how close their world had come to renewed instability. "You asked me to take care of you," he said quietly. "I did. I think you're doing quite well on your own." Her silver eyes reflected the fading light. "Strength is not the absence of support." He nodded slowly. "Then I suppose I'll stay." "As my protector?" she asked. "As your advisor," he replied, a pause, "and your friend." Her long ears tilted forward slightly, a gesture he now recognized as warmth. "That is more than enough," she said. The red systems on the star map no longer pulsed with threat. They glowed steadily, integrated into shared roots. A small act on a distant battlefield had become something larger, not destiny imposed, but choice reaffirmed. Years ago, he had carried a wounded girl from fire without knowing who she was. Now he stood beside a queen who ruled not through fear, but through courage tempered with compassion. The galaxy had not changed overnight. Conflicts would rise again. Challenges would return. But this chapter had closed, not with explosions, but with understanding. And for the first time in a long while, Captain Arman Vale felt not like a soldier passing through history, but like someone helping shape it.